Hello, and welcome to the Twilight Imperium Junkies podcast. This is Rand.
And this is Henry.
And today we're coming at you with the second part of our Alliance chat. We are announcing the details of our online Alliance tournament, and we're breaking down some nitty-gritty detail for some of the rules regarding this game variant. But first, before we get into all that stuff, let's talk a little bit about this latest episode of TI Junkies that just came out this weekend, Season 4, Episode 9, an Alliances episode. Some Junkie regulars were in the episode: Nathan, Matt, Drago, Paul, newer Ventura Junkies like Walt, John, Joe,
And Zach.
It was a real spicy game. 8 players, took place over 2 days.
Yeah, that already was one of the highlights for me, was that this game took place over 2 days, and also the fact that everyone slept over, and there was a big ol' Twilight Imperium slumber party. Board games allow us to never grow up, folks.
Now let's check out this recap.
Matt picked 8, and I really didn't know why he was doing that. Then I started looking. Matt and Walt are poised to try to take Mechatol, because that's their win. That's the only way they win.
They're going to leave everything on Mechatol because we want to make sure Matt loses support if he activates the system.
Walt has Fleet Logistics, and Dominus Orb, he's on the 7.
They're going to try to take Mechatol and then pop 8.
If there's an action phase secret for either Joe or John, that's game.
Activate Mechatol X. Ooh. With Fleet Logistics. Wins games. Maybe. We'll see.
With his partner, with the 8.
With the 8.
Right after the 7 for the win.
9 ships with 3 dreads, a War Sun, like 3 cruisers, all of my mechs which were hitting on 4s, the Alistor, which allowed my mechs to hit in the air as well.
The stars aligned, we had the plastic, we had what we needed to get it done.
Winning on a big space battle over Mechatol is a great way to end an Alliance game.
Exciting.
Long story short is, if you're in an Alliance game, and you have an option to ban, ban Mahawk, ban Necro.
Cabal Hakan combo. That was fun.
Federation of Titanic Stoogery.
We didn't do much stooging.
We did early stooging.
We did early extorting.
Yeah, a lot of extortion with a smile.
We're a good team. We're definitely going to do this again.
Yes.
Teams All is in there.
Congrats, Walt.
Yeah, congrats,
Matt.
I guess.
It's technically, you guys played a game.
You rolled dice.
Pretty climactic ending. You love an action phase win.
Especially when Mechatol is involved. I mean, Necro Mahawk taking the win off an Imperial pop like that. No one saw it coming. It was really poetic for them.
I like seeing the legendary planets at the center of their cluster, like little mini Mechatol Rexes scattered around the board.
Oh, I love it. The Twilight Imperium galaxy already feels so epic. This cluster map, the 3 sections, and the race to the middle, like you said, it could give a lot of little rewarding paths to planets beyond just Mechatol.
How about that Titans agent round 1 from our boy?
Did already start off with some beef with Nate, who's playing Titans.
Oh, the extortion was brilliant.
I'd worked out a deal with my neighbor to get gravity drive, rolled and hit.
Nate just out of nowhere, not included in this all, just goes, I cancel the hit.
You're not doing that unless I get a trade good.
That was some spicy extortion from our boy, but I approve. That agent probably would have gone unused round 1, and they did end up getting value out of it. They got a relic ultimately.
Yeah, getting value, getting creative.
And making enemies.
That did seem to be the theme of Joe and Nate's team, the Titanic Federation of Stoogery. They continue to draw ire, and I think it's one of those situations where, in the end, they did get the beatdown from the other teams, and you have to wonder, would the other teams be as determined to give Joe and Nate the beatdown if Joe and Nate had not been as prickly throughout the game?
These are the social dynamic questions of TI. It was a really fun episode of TI Junkies and a really exciting one to lead up to the Alliance tournament.
Yeah, if you have not gotten pumped yet for the Alliance tournament, go watch this episode. I'm sure it will get you in the mood.
So let's talk tournament details. So the format's going to be 3 6-player games, so 3 teams each. The winners of each game will then play in a final. This tournament's going to start the weekend after Stooge for the Throne final, which is on July 12th. So the tournament runs from July 19th through August 9th. Signups are open today for our Patreon members.
If there are any spots left, then next Monday they will be available to everybody else. But remember, seats for this one are going to be a lot more limited than Stooge for the Throne. So if you do really want to play, please sign up as soon as possible. Otherwise, it's a little more likely that you'll come on as a backup player or a backup team, which we still welcome.
There are 18 players in this tournament.
You are free to sign up with another player as a team, or you can just sign up solo for a spot and you'll end up with someone random who comes in to sign up as well.
And 6 seats are already taken by the Junkie teams.
Yeah, let's talk about the Junkie teams. So, in game 1, we have Team Pew Pew Politics. That is going to be Kevin, aka Drago Thaxton, and Paul.
Representing the Ventura Junkies. And game 2, we've got a recreated team from the TI Junkies universe. Yes, everyone, the Tennis Boys are back.
That's the Tennis Boys second service, everybody.
No one knows what that means, but that is Henry and Nathan playing in game 2.
Our fellow tennis boys and girls out there will know what it means. Hopefully, Nate and I will be able to set aside our async salt and work together to win this tournament. I can't wait.
And finally, last but not least, me and Matt, bad cop, worst cop.
You guys are in game 3.
We're here, we're in it to win it.
So just like Stooge for the Throne, there's a sort of silly gimmick where presumably it's possible for all of the Junkies to advance to a final and have the final just be a normal Junkies game. So far, Stooge for the Throne 1, that has not happened. Stooge for the Throne 2, it did not happen, but it came closer to happening.
Very close, 4 of us.
So let's see if in this Alliances tournament we can get 3 Junkie teams in the final. Let's go.
Team Pew Pew Politics versus Tennis Boys versus Bad Cop, Worst Cop. I want to see it.
So like we said, this tournament does have just 18 spots. This is the smallest version of an Alliance tournament that makes sense to us. But we really do hope that everyone has a good time and it can serve as a trial run for a bigger 54-person tournament perhaps down the line. Fingers crossed. And the last thing I'll add here, it is most likely that these will be long games. So please make sure you're aware of that when you sign up. Bring your stamina, bring your enthusiasm. Let's have some fun in Alliance mode.
We're going to encourage players to limit their sidebars just to be mindful of everyone's time, but Alliance mode takes time regardless. So just keep that in mind when signing up.
All right, Rand, hit us with the setup and map making process for our Alliances tournament, please.
So to start setup, everyone rolls for speaker, and then the players with the highest 3 rolls will take the speaker, second, and third seats, while their ally will take the seat across from them. From there, players will go to the user interface and deal a bag draft. For the settings, we'll set it to 3 faction count for each player. And on the right side of the settings there, we're doing max spice mode, just like the Stooge for the Throne tournament, which means 3 alpha wormholes, 3 beta wormholes, and 2 legendaries. After dealing these bags, players will pool all their factions together on the table. And here we enter a banning round. So in speaker order, players will go around and ban a single faction from the pool. After that, the players will shuffle the remaining 12 factions and distribute them evenly so that each team has 4 factions to pick from after the map is built. After each team receives their cards, map building rules as written will proceed, starting with the speaker. And after the map is finally built, in speaker order, each team will reveal the faction combo that they have chosen.
We got some logistics out of the way, Rand. Are you ready to dive into some of the rules questions we saw on the Discord?
We got some doozies here.
The plan is we are going to go through the entire Alliance rule set and talk about some of the most prominent effects of each as we go. We're also going to address questions that folks sent in on the Discord as they come up. I do have to give one big broad disclaimer. Alliance mode is inherently fuzzy. There are inherent gray areas. It does not map perfectly onto the existing Twilight Imperium 4th edition Prophecy of Kings Codices 1 through 4 rule set. So in some cases, we have to just make judgment calls to keep the rules consistent throughout our event. The rules decisions that we've made might be different from the ones that happen at your table. It doesn't mean your table is wrong. It just means there are some ambiguous interpretations of how Alliance rules play out. All right, so starting with setup. We have to just hit one of the setup rules because each player takes the Alliance reference card that corresponds to their ally and places it in their play area.
So we got a question from Bells about the Mahakt.
And if their ally gains the ability to lift tokens the way Mahakt does.
While the Mahakt do not typically have an Alliance promissory note, they do have an Alliance reference card, and Alliance here is put in quotation marks because it is not actually their commander ability.
Yeah, they are the one exception to this commander sharing situation in alliances. Their reference card, which is in Codex II, just says that their ally during setup has to put a token into the Mahawked fleet pool. So if Mahawked is your ally, you will not be able to lift your own tokens. Mahawked will not be able to lift your tokens. They will simply start with one of your command tokens in their fleet pool. Let's talk transactions. And here we got, when performing transactions with your ally, players follow a modified set of rules. First, when you exchange commodities with your ally, they do not convert into trade goods. That's pretty straightforward. You can't wash your ally's commodities. Secondly, while you may receive promissory notes from your ally as part of a transaction to later give to another player, for example, you cannot resolve those promissory notes. So I would just want to highlight here, that means if Cabal is your ally, they give you Crucible, you're not going to be able to use that to move through rifts. If Yin is your ally and they give you Greyfire, no, you're not going to be able to play that during a combat.
So another question we got, do I get to trade with my alliance partner even if we are not neighbors?
So the answer there is going to be no. The transaction rules in the Alliance variant do not change prerequisites for negotiating a transaction. And while, as we'll see later, your allies' planets do count as yours in some cases, you still have to become neighbors with your alliance partner the old-fashioned way. But it's actually pretty easy in Alliance mode. If you follow construction, primary or secondary, and drop a structure on one of their planets, you guys are now neighbors.
In a similar vein, Jadim Jedi asks if a player can pillage their ally's neighbor.
The short answer here is no. Just like in the response to the last question, we're not changing what constitutes a neighbor. It can be a little complicated because your allies' planets, as we'll hear later, do count as yours for abilities, and pillage is an ability, but not other game effects, which being neighbors would be. Pillage is an ability which is dependent on being neighbors. You are not neighbors with your allies' neighbors. And then we had one more question for transactions. Rand, hit us.
Can Hakan give action cards to their alliance partner?
The answer is yes. The Hakan ability states that action cards can be exchanged as part of transactions, and in Alliance mode, you're still perfectly capable of carrying out transactions with the player that is your alliance partner.
So next we'll move into movement and control.
So first up, your ships may move through and into systems that contain your allies' ships. This does not trigger a space combat. No need to fear accidentally gumming up your ally or your ally accidentally gumming up you. You can move through each other, you can move into each other's systems. In the same vein, your ground forces may land on planets controlled by your ally. This does not trigger a ground combat or cause you to gain control of that planet. Next, when a game effect allows a player to redistribute command tokens, they may also exchange planet cards with their ally, provided that the receiving player has at least one ground force or structure on that planet. This exchange does not change the ready or exhausted state of a planet card, and does not trigger abilities that occur when you gain control of a planet.
The most common times this would happen would be in status phase when you're rearranging tokens, off the warfare primary, or off predictive intelligence.
So all we're doing here is exchanging planet cards. We're not gaining control, we're not losing control, which actually leads us into another question we got.
Kuma asks about exchanging a legendary planet or home system with your ally while you have Shard of the Throne. Does Shard exchange hands?
And the answer is no. Exchanging planets does not seem to be a case of losing or gaining control, and the text on Shard of the Throne says that when a player gains control of a legendary planet you control, or a planet you control in your home system, that player gains this card. Therefore, Shard would stay in your hands. So similarly, due to the fact that these rules say exchange planet cards, and you're not technically gaining or losing control of planets, you're not going to be able to help your ally out with Become a Martyr by exchanging their home system. Next, when your ally activates a system, you may simultaneously perform a tactical action into that system with your ally. If you do, you must spend and place a token from your tactic pool as normal. I do just want to note here that it's called a simultaneous tactical action, so relics like Dominus Orb or Crown of Amphidia that have effects related to tactical actions are fair game.
A cool thing to note is that means you could also join in on these tactical actions even if you've passed. Also, you may, if your ally allows it, transport, support, and commit their fighters and ground forces using your units that have capacity. So this was actually seen in this latest Alliance episode. Walt carried Matt's mech over to that final Mechatol attack, and then with predictive intelligence, transferred control over before that Imperial pop for the win. Which brings us to our next question from Pally. By the way, if you haven't checked out their podcast, Valifar Assimilator P, it's a very fun async Twilight Imperium podcast with tons of stories and fun facts.
Check it out.
Pally asked, if you're taking an action and moving a carrier with none of your ground forces but your allies' ground forces and resolving a ground combat, can your ally score secret objectives like Spark a Rebellion or Brave the Void?
Yes, because as we just read in that rule, you can commit your allies' ground forces with their consent. If the planet to which those ground forces are committed contains another player's units, then that will trigger a ground combat. Therefore, your ally is going to be eligible to score such secret objectives, but keep in mind that you are not, because you would not be a participant in this ground combat, despite the fact that it's your turn. So that brings us to the next section, combat and unit abilities. During a combat or unit ability roll, where a player and their ally each have units present, both can participate in the same combat. Their rolls are combined, and hits are assigned as normal. When an opposing force produces hits against allied players, the allies will decide together which units the hits will be assigned against. If they cannot come to a consensus, the active player assigns the hits.
I just want to point out that I love how the rulebook says what to do if they can't come to a consensus.
I know, every time it says something like that, I hope it's not an omen about me and Nate teaming together. And all of a sudden, because Nate's the active player, he's killing all my units, even though we're allies.
Rough.
So this actually is a chance to address a couple combat-related questions we received. This first one is about the necrovirus.
If I'm Necro and I attack a team in a system, so let's say there are two different players' units in the space area there, do I get one tech from either of them, or one tech from both, or only a tech from the player whose units are destroyed?
So the Necro's technological singularity ability states that it can be used once per combat, and those units still belong to each player individually, even though they are both your opponents. So you're only going to be able to gain one technology per combat after one of either of these players' units is destroyed, which might mean you're in a situation where you destroy one player's units, but you want to see if you destroy the other player's units because they have a tech you're more interested in. Or you might see the non-Necro team choosing to assign hits on units of the player with less valuable tech.
That's a really interesting dilemma to face as Necro, where you'd never think in a regular game you'd hold off on using your ability during a combat, but when your opponent's got an ally who has their back, it's something you might have to consider.
So there was a similar question with regard to the Mahakt gaining tokens. The Mahakt ability does not specify once per combat, it just says opponents, and both of these players are your opponents. If you win the combat as Mahakt, you'll be able to take a token from each player, assuming you don't already have one.
I can't believe it. That's rough.
Not if you're the Mahakt. Okay, let's talk abilities and effects.
So, your allies' units count as neither your units nor as other players' units for the purpose of resolving game effects and abilities.
So an instance where this might come up is if you play a morale boost that adds a +1 to your unit's combat rolls for a round, this would not apply to your allies' units.
In addition to that, abilities that trigger when a player activates a system that contains another player's units, planets, or command tokens do not trigger when those players are allies. So you can't activate your ally system just so that they could play forward supply base, for example.
Or Counterstroke. And we did actually get a question about the Empyrean Commander, but since, again, your allies' units count neither as your units nor as other players' units, then the Empyrean Commander would not be triggered by your ally moving ships into one of your systems. Next, your unit abilities, Space Cannon, Planetary Shield, etc., do not affect your ally.
That's nice.
Yeah, so even if he wants to,
Nathan can't PDS you.
Nathan won't be able to PDS me in the tournament.
You're in the clear for now.
For now.
But unlike those unit abilities, agent abilities can be used on your ally.
Hello, disgusting Nalu agent shenanigans.
Nalu Winu, take me back, baby. Take me back. And the last point about abilities and effects are that your allies' planets count as your planets for the purpose of resolving abilities, which we briefly touched on when we were talking about Mentek's Pillage, but you cannot exhaust them and they do not count for scoring objectives or scoring the Imperial victory point.
So you might see this come up with certain technologies. You also might see this come up with certain leaders. I think a prominent example would be the Soul Commander, which triggers at the start of a ground combat on a planet you control. So actually, if you end up in a ground combat against the Soul player's ally, they're each going to get a free infantry at the start of that combat, regardless of who owns the planet you're fighting on. So yeah, maybe consider banning Soul.
No. Take Matt's advice. Ban Mahakt. Unless you're in my game 3, don't ban Mahakt. Mahawk. Let Matt have Mahawk. I'll have Necro. Things will be fine.
But don't forget, they don't count for scoring objectives. So if there's a public objective to control 4 planets of the same trait, if you have 3 hazardous, your ally has 1 hazardous, neither of you qualify for that public objective.
Bummer.
And if your ally has Mechatol Rex and you have Imperial, neither of you score an Imperial point when you pop that strategy card.
Predictive intelligence is a hot tech in alliances, I'll tell you that. So some questions about abilities and effects. Does the Arborec commander trigger if their ally's space dock is activated?
So let's just take a look at this Arborec commander. It says, after another player activates a system that contains 1 or more of your units that have production. So while this is an ability, it makes reference to your units. And the alliance rules state that your allies' units count as neither your units nor as other players' units for the purpose of resolving game effects and abilities. So no, the Arborec's allies space dock does not trigger anything for the Arborec.
So what about cards like Unstable Planet or other abilities that usually you can't use on yourself in a TI game?
Yeah, there's this TI rule that you can't hurt yourself with abilities. And the answer here is going to be no. You cannot use a card like Unstable Planet on an ally's planet because the alliance rules state your allies' planets count as your planets for the purpose of resolving abilities. Action cards are abilities. So anything you can't do to your own planets, you can't do to your allies' planets.
The flip side of this, cards like Rise of a Messiah put an infantry on not just your planets, but also your allies' planets too.
Yeah, it's going to be the same with Economic Initiative. Because these are abilities, and your allies' planets count as your planets for the purpose of resolving abilities.
And the coolest example of this is the Diplomacy Strategy card, because when you pop that or follow the secondary, you could ready either your or your allies' planets. So, if you needed to distribute it that way, 1 person on the team could have 4 planets readied off Diplo instead of the even 2-2 distribution.
While we're talking action cards, Will posted a question about how Skilled Retreat works when both you and your ally are in the same system. So, Skilled Retreat says move all of your ships, and like we've established, your allies' ships units are not your units. Therefore, Skilled Retreat would not affect them.
However, that also means that because Skilled Retreat says your ships go to an adjacent system that does not contain another player's ships, that would mean you could retreat into a system that contained your allies' ships using a Skilled Retreat.
So while we're still talking about game abilities, let's cover a question we got about biostems. Can it be used to ready one of your allies' planets? I think you can probably guess by this point, but again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but because your allies' planets count as yours when resolving abilities, yes, you may ready one of their tech specialty planets with biostems. However, nowhere do the rules establish that their technologies count as yours for good reason. So you're not going to be able to use biostems to ready your allies' exhausted technologies.
With other techs like Scanlink, if you have a unit on your allies' planets, you can explore that upon activation. And there's just a lot of interactions you can have with all these techs and abilities and effects and action cards, and I think there's just going to be 1,000 edge cases, and that's where the fuzziness and the personal interpretations will come into play. Some other fun facts about techs in Alliance games: anti-mass deflectors and assault cannon. Those kind of techs stack. You get a -1 for each player, or you get to destroy a ship for each player that has 3 ships in the system. So that can lead to some serious carnage.
Luckily for assault cannon fans out there, the rules state that you may both participate in a combat, and your units are not your allies' units. It doesn't say that you both merge into one superorganism, superfaction with 1 set of units and 1 set of tech.
And 1 set of assault cannons. So just, fun fact, Bells pointed out that double anti-mass makes extra mechs hit on 10s, and that's kind of funny.
I could really use that in one of my asyncs right now, where extra is a thorn in my side.
And the last couple of things to cover: elimination. A player cannot be eliminated as long as their ally controls a planet, because, you still exist somewhere out there.
Yeah, the last section here is just winning the game. If there's anyone listening right now that doesn't yet know that one person has to get to 14 and the other person has to get to 10, I applaud you for sitting through all the technicalities before getting to one of the headlines. One player must have 14 victory points, and their ally must have at least 10 victory points in order for that alliance to be the winners.
So let's see you guys score those points in the upcoming TI Junkies Alliance tournament.
So we hope this clarified some Alliance rules for everyone. There are many more questions to be had about this variant.
They truly could be endless.
We are compiling the rule set for our tournament, which will include rulings on tons of action cards, tons of technologies, tons of abilities, tons of game mechanics. So if this episode raised even more Alliance variant questions for you, which I'm sure it has, please stay tuned because we will be continuing to update the rule set for the Alliance's tournament as we get closer to Game 1.
You'll be able to find this resource on our newly launched TIJunkies.com website. That's where we're going to have information about upcoming content and upcoming opportunities for online competitive TI play. If this Alliance handbook sounds interesting to you, please feel free to use it in any of your upcoming games. It could be helpful to have a written consensus going into an Alliance game for players to be able to reference. So it's not just the host of the game having to make these calls.
And also that means if you run into any rules questions during your Alliance tournament games, you'll be able to use these rulings as reference.
It's been a real fun journey trying to interpret what's accurate and what's not. I wouldn't be surprised if some people listening to this thought, hey, that can't be right, or hey, that must be different, and maybe it is. You don't really know. Alliance is this big fuzzy world. We're just trying to get the players of our upcoming Alliance tournament somewhat on the same page, and hope to develop a tool that might help others in their future Alliance games.
Yeah, shoutouts to Will and Drago for chatting TI rules legalese with me as the Junkies endeavor to compile a scrutable set of guidelines for Alliance play. So guys, please do sign up for the Alliance's tournament. Patreon members, your signups are open right now. Everyone else, your signups will be open next week.
And remember to mark your calendars for the Stooge for the Throne 2 final game. July 12th, come see Drago, Carnal, Nikki, K Ruthless, Matt, and myself duke it out on the game board.
Who will be this year's Stooge Master?
Stick around and find out.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Twilight Imperium Junkies podcast.
If you like what we do and want to support the show, check out our Patreon, where amongst other things, you can vote on topics for future episodes.
Keep up with the TI Junkies series by subscribing on YouTube.
Until next time, keep stooging, or maybe don't.
Unless you're my stooge.